Welcome on inside the Business of Social podcast powered by STN Digital. I'm your host, David Brickley. Every single week on the show, we talk to the experts to keep our thumb on the pulse of the ever-changing digital marketing and social industry, and this week is no different. We have the SVP. You know what? Before I introduce the guest, I think we need to get into the most important part of the show, which is this is going to be episode number 44. I was thinking about it today, Will. What's sad is when we get to like episode 100, this game is over. I mean, it's going to be, at 99, we're going to have to figure something else out to do as a little inside joke for the listeners. This is a tough list, man. 44, you have Hank Aaron, you have Jerry West, the great Pete Maravich, Iceman himself, George Gervin, John Riggins, Reggie Jackson. This is probably our heaviest list ever. I'm going to go with the 25-time All-Star Hank Aaron. 25, 1955 to 1970. How is that possible? This dude played a whole century, it seemed like. All right, so the Hank Aaron.
Go to school, graduate, have kids, get married.
And this dude's still All-Star. Yeah, exactly. World Series champ, 1957, Hank Aaron. Was the home run leader before Barry Bonds took it over, right? So, all right, Hank Aaron podcast. I'm really excited about this young man coming on the show. I actually met up with him. You guys remember Dave Sethi, who's the head of sports at Instagram, good friend of mine. Had a drink with him out in New York recently, and he brought Brendon for some drinks and was able to meet him. And just a really cool dude, Brendon Mulvihill. He is the SVP, head of licensing at Jukin Media. So essentially, and we were just reading some press on them, you know, they've given up to $20 million to amateur video creators in order to co-license user-generated content. So they're able to go to folks like a Tosh.0 or Ridiculousness and license this content for them so that way they don't get in trouble from as far as a lawsuit or anybody that uploads content in that regard. And also from a digital standpoint, a lot of people, whether it's campaigns, whether it's brands, they want to focus on user-generated content. You've seen Snapchat and GoPro and Apple have different pieces of content on digital or even on linear commercials where they use UGC. They probably hit up Jukin Media because these guys do it best in class. So they also own a couple sub brands. If you've heard of Fail Army, if you've heard of People Are Awesome or the Pet Collective, Fail Army has 15 million subscribers on YouTube, 2 million followers on Instagram. So not only are they able to license this content, but they're able to double down on it with some of their own platforms internally. So you'll hear, I think, a lot of good knowledge on UGC. And listen, even as an agency owner here at STN, working with many brands, I get the question all the time. It really feels like the Wild Wild West, right? A lot of people are using copyrighted material, and is it fair use, and is it parody law? There's still a lot of gray area there, but I'll ask Brendon, he deals with this stuff every day. So what are best practices for us marketers if we're going to tap into some fun UGC content? What should we do to make sure we don't, get called into the lawyer's office at some point later in the week, if you know what I mean? So this is going to be a great one, episode 44, the SVP, head of licensing at Jukin Media, Brendon Mulvihill. All right, he is the SVP, head of licensing at Jukin Media. Brendon Mulvihill joins us on the Business Social. Brendon, what's going on, man?
Hey, David, how are you, brother?
Good to see you again. I always kick things off with a random question. I know our friend Dave over at Instagram, I always give him a hard time about Notre Dame, so I'll give you a hard time about Michigan. Jim Harbaugh. Has that been a success, not success, somewhere in the middle? I mean, what is your honest opinion on that, his period or his time at Michigan so far?
I'm a diehard Michigan fan. When Harbaugh was named the coach, this is year 5 now, so 5 years ago, I was ecstatic. And so I think he hasn't done the things that we've needed him to do in the big games, right? And so this is year 5. This is the year. I think he's got to prove it. But I don't think we're not getting rid of Harbaugh. It's the idea of us going to another coach doesn't really make sense to me right now. Yeah, so we're sticking with him for sure.
Well, your boy Karis LeVert too got, I think, at $40-50 million. So.
Yeah, man. I'll tell you what, that team, the John Beilein and what he did with Michigan basketball was just incredible. Yeah, incredible. And I'm happy Juwan's there. Like, I think it's going to be.
Yeah, that's actually good.
I think it's a game changer.
I love it. All right, so this is going to be a very interesting conversation, and I want you to. How about this? We'll start off here. Why don't you give the listeners a quick sense of what Jukin Media is first and foremost?
Sure. Yeah. So Jukin is essentially a company that's built on the acquisition of social video or user-generated content. Okay. So what we do is we take and acquire all that really great content that you shoot on your cell phones, whether it's of your kids or your dog or you doing amazing things that you're passionate about. And we acquire that from everyday people. Okay. And then what we have two parts of our business. We take all that content and we license it out to third parties for their creative. Okay. So that's ad agencies and brands, that's television shows, that's digital publishers. And then we also package that content up into original series that we produce for several digital owned channels that we have. So we own a channel called People Are Awesome, another channel called Fail Army, the Pet Collective. Those are the biggest three. And we reimagine how you can take this really great content shot by everyday people and push it out into the world and make really great stories out of it.
And from a linear perspective, people remember from a UGC perspective, America's Funniest Home Videos was kind of that first entry to that, right? And now you look at, I believe you and I were talking about in New York when we met, Ridiculousness on MTV actually uses a lot of your licensed content, correct?
Yeah. So if you look back, like I give this presentation called The History of UGC, and it starts with America's Funniest Home Videos.
Good.
I mean, that's where it starts. And then you move forward today with the evolution of the cell phone. There's a lot of details in there.
Tosh.0, the whole deal, yeah.
Tosh.0, yeah. And so, Ridiculousness, that type of show exists all over the world. Mm-hmm. And we supply a large number of the clips to shows like that, yeah.
And I think from a business model perspective, at least when you talk about linear, America's Home, Funniest Home Videos or Ridiculousness or Tosh.0, they want to make sure it's licensed so David Brickley, who did the backflip off the cliff, doesn't sue. Comedy Central doesn't sue MTV for me giving you the right type deal, even if there is attribution? Yeah,
so the thing is like everything that you create, whether it's a piece of music or you write something down or you shoot it on your camera, on your phone, that has copyright. Okay. And so you own it. That's yours. And so for someone else to use it, to monetize it, to exploit it, they have to license it. And, fair use is something that people bring up a lot. And there's like, how do you measure fair use? But those things still retain copyright. So yeah, they license us so you get not only just attribution, but we can help those people make money. And so that you're not taken advantage of, quite frankly, because we know the television shows and the digital publishers of the world are making money off of that content. And we think you as an individual deserve a piece of it. So that's what we did.
Well, a pretty big piece. So I was reading an article before the show here, $20 million you guys have given out to amateur video creators. So your team is kind of scouring the web, finding these amazing, funny, incredible videos. And from a monetary standpoint, can it get down to as little as $50 all the way to $10,000? Like how does those different things work? And are you really negotiating against yourself at some point? Like what's the bare bones behind it?
Yeah, so it can be anywhere from hundreds of dollars a clip to thousands of dollars for clips. And it's really based on the usage. So the digital sort of usage that's editorial is different from a big brand putting it in a campaign that goes across the world for broadcast and internet, right? And so we make sure that we're getting the most value from that content and sharing roughly half of the revenue that we make from it back to the actual video owner. So it's something we're super proud of. We really spend time trying to get people to understand that their content is valuable and that we can help them pay for school or pay for vacation or pay, for their family to go on their next trip. So it's something that we're really proud of.
I would love to get into fair use. I think every social media marketer, we were just talking about before the show a little bit, it's the wild, wild west, right? There's no hard, fast rule. I mean, you were even saying that if you shoot it, you own it. But then also with Instagram and Facebook privacy policies, they say they own it if you put it on their feed. So I guess what is the hard, fast rule that you've seen? Because you live and breathe this stuff every single day in terms of if it's more editorial and you give credit, usually okay. And if you're making money off it or create a show, that's where you really have to be careful. Like the social marketers listening to this show, like what are the different things you would watch out for?
Yeah, what you want to do is so everything has a copyright, right? So someone does own it, but you're going to want to get permission in one way or another from that person. Just providing attribution, while it is currency, particularly on Instagram, right, which I spend a ton of time with, it's currency. People love if you're get your video on House of Highlights and they mention you, that's a big deal, right? But that's not enough. It's not enough just to say it comes from that person. You have to actually get their permission. So if you don't get their permission properly, or you don't license the content properly from someone like us, there is a risk, and you should take the time to go and get that. But I think there's so much content out there, and it's super valuable, that it's worth spending the time going and getting the proper permissions, because it's endless, and there's a lot of stuff you can use.
I mean, UGC has really been incredible, and also, I mean, it's somewhat relevant, right, this conversation, because Instagram just tried to pull off a bunch of meme accounts off their platform. That got so much heat that they actually reversed course there, and then I think appointed a new partnership manager for the meme creators. So it's funny how the internet can push back on that stuff, because, listen, UGC memeable content is so huge right now, and so many people get so much joy out of it. You look at the F Jerrys of the world as well, and what they've been able to create, or the Fat Jewish, all based off UGC or some of that meme humor. And I know that's what you're in every day.
Yeah, man, it drives the internet, right? It's we call it a currency, or it's our social language. That's how we describe it. And when you look at the counts that have grown so significantly, like the Fat Jewish, or Fuck Jerry, or House of Highlights, or some of these guys who are incorporating all kinds of different content, it really does drive what the internet is about, in this sort of sharing culture and sharing content. And we just try to make it a place where we feel everybody gets value from it, and that we play this role to help drive that opportunity for regular people to make money off of the content that they create. So
from a business model perspective, how do you guys work? So if a House of Highlights wanted to work with you guys because you have access to this library of content, is it a subscription fee? Does it have to be, do they search a library of content and put in fails or missed dunks or whatever those different keywords are, and then they're able to buy those individually for digital uses? Like how, I know it's some of a granular question, but I'm interested just how that works.
Yeah, it's all of the above.
Okay.
So you can come to us if you want one clip, and all of the content's searchable on the website. So it's sort of, if you think about it, it's a Getty Images or Shutterstock for user-generated content, right? Quick search, find the content. You can buy it actually from the website, or you can talk to one of us. So that's one way. But we do have subscription models available. So if you think you're going to use 10, 15, 20 clips a month, obviously we'll see efficiencies there. That's mostly for the digital space. For television shows, we have shows that buy 1,000 clips from us, right? Because they're powering their entire show off our content. We have brands and agencies mostly come on a project-by-project basis to really dig in, and we help them find the creative that works. We have people here that will spend time with your creative, whether it's for a show or just understanding your editorial voice, and pitching content to you daily, newsletters, things like that, to just really help the process out from a creative standpoint.
And once again, the business model to go to the user itself is, hey, we're going to pay you a flat fee to own this. And additionally, every time an agency comes to us or a TV comes to us, we'll kind of split whatever we get from them type deal?
Yeah, so for the most part, we never own the content.
Okay.
The original creator always owns the content. We have the copyright control, right? And then typically it is a rev share relationship. Okay. Sometimes there's advances. It depends on the popularity of the clip at the time. Yep. And then yes, we essentially split the revenue that we create, and that's generated like you said, that $20 million number. That's where that comes from.
How are you guys able to stay on trend? And so much of this is real time, right? There's an amazing meme or an amazing clip that goes viral overnight, and then you see it across so many different feeds. And I know people want to be original. They want to be able to, be first to the market. So are you guys is your team just constantly scouring and literally picking up the phone and DMing and getting on top of these clips as soon as possible? Yeah,
that's exactly it. So there's about 30 people that are responsible for that job. They're placed all over the world, and they run 24/7. So they run in shifts, and they're just monitoring the internet. We probably see, I think it's in the range of 3,000 videos a day. They're just churning through videos, and then we pull. It's really about curation, honestly, because there's so many videos, and obviously we don't even get to all of them. It's about curation. It's about finding what we think are the best ones for our clients, for the library, and obviously for our brands.
And talk to me a little bit about Fail Army, because You guys have 1.9 million followers on Instagram, over 14.3 million on YouTube. How did that factor in? Was that the original idea and then it spinned into Jukin Media to offer that to other people? Or was that something where, hey, we already have licensed this clips, let's develop a couple sub-brands to capitalize on that?
Fail Armor is a really great story. So our founder, John Skogmo, he started acquiring clips on his own on YouTube. He was a clip show producer. And so he started his business by acquiring clips and then reselling them. So he had amassed a decent sized library. What he saw was a page on YouTube that was taking his clips that he had acquired. Okay. So rather than shut the account down, he actually created an agreement and basically bought that channel as a way for him to display the content that he was acquiring. And then he called it Fail Army, had a great name, and it became a thing.
Yeah.
And so it was a little bit by accident, but just really great foresight. And then, as you've seen, it's just grown tremendously over the past, John's owned this company for 10 years, and probably over the past 7, I think, is when Fail Army started to get involved. And that process is something we've duplicated several times with our other brands. So the similar stories with each of the other ones.
Yeah, people are awesome on Instagram. It has 1.2 million. Jukin Video, 200,000. The Pet Collected, 350,000. So those sub brands, and I haven't checked on YouTube and things like that, but I know they're doing well.
Yeah, so Facebook is actually the largest driver of use for us. So Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, across those. So we have 5 brands. Across the 5 brands, we drive anywhere from 3.5 to 4 billion views a month.
Wow.
And that includes, we're a distributed network, so we don't have owned and operated sites. We're on, like you said, the various social channels as well as digital linear streaming outlets as well. I think we're up to 184 million fans across those channels.
Awesome.
So that team does a really amazing job with, continuing to evolve how they sort of optimize the content for the platforms.
How have you guys been able to monetize on that? Because those are obviously some amazing numbers, some great brands. You're in a really good place because you have relationships and or shared copyright, if you will, with the actual content. So you're not going to be in any hot water there. How have you guys been able to monetize or double down on that stuff?
Yeah, so it's a few different ways. So we have a direct sales team that's out there selling inventory across YouTube and branded content on Facebook, as well as on the digital linear streaming platforms. We obviously have the indirect revenue that comes from the platforms, and we have a programmatic ad stack also to plug in there as well. So we're constantly tweaking and finding ways in which we monetize. The great thing about this particular business is that one clip can be skinned 9 different ways. Yeah. And that's sort of the foundation of how we are able to just continue to add revenue streams, is just thinking about how does one clip create revenue for us.
All right, so I know you're hot on Instagram, as we all are, and I think from a UGC perspective, I love what you just said there, skinning it 9 different ways. I've seen a lot of success from brands simply, rather than just posting the video and using Instagram as a caption, taking the time to create that meme template, if you will, with the title. And I almost find myself not really taking the time to watch a video more than 3 seconds unless I have that title that tells me what I'm getting into. Then I'll invest the time. But again, this is your world, so I'm sure you've seen the differences by just making those slight tweaks on creative.
I'll tell you what, yeah. So that idea, that meme template is I think one way that we sort of, you get someone immediately. You don't do the introductions. You don't do something that's sort of the brand logo up front, right? People leave immediately. You got to get right into it.
No intro cards.
No intro cards. And the other thing I think people have to understand is like how important the copy is on the post, and understanding, like, being able to write in the voice that of your audience in a really authentic way. It's just as important as the imagery, right? I think there's some folks do it really, really well, and you can't forget about that. So that's how I think you tie it all together. Like, you can take any clip, but if you got to make it in your own voice, otherwise it fails.
Yeah, exactly. You're big as well on, scaling the content game for brands becoming publishers. I think oftentimes you and I have seen this, right? Where brands are just constantly talking about their product and how awesome they are and why people should care about them, but not creating kind of that community, which I always talk about on this show. But I know you know that game really well. So what is your thoughts on kind of scaling content for brands and making sure that they become publishers first and foremost?
Yeah, I talk about it as thinking about the passion points of your audience and of your consumer, and rather than just delivering product message and shots of product all the time, think about what are your consumers passionate about? Is it music? Is it food? What is it? Is it travel? And delivering them content that fits that passion point, and your engagement's going to go up. I was at GoPro for 2.5 years,
Yep.
right? So I look to GoPro as sort of the gold standard of how you deliver really great content that speaks to the passion points of the fans. Obviously, the product, it was good for the product as well, but that's the reality, is that you're going to get bored of just product imagery. So I think that's the
you are so right. Now that you say that with GoPro, it's not as if you go to their feed and you just see a bunch of great product photography of the camera. It's more about what happens when you have the camera in your hands and those different once in a lifetime moments, snowboard trips, etc., that are captured on the GoPro. So it's really a movement rather than a piece of equipment.
Right, and there's so much content that exists for you, and this is our business, but I think in the way we think about it is user generated, is like there's influencer content, there's brand fan content, and then there's the authentic content in the world. And so you have an opportunity to use all three of those levers to really drive really great social media experiences on your organic channels. And it's something that I think brands forget about, that we have to just constantly just remind each other that that's the way you keep fans. Now, the ROI takes a little bit more time to play out, I think, but overall you're going to get somebody who's going to be a fan for much longer and a consumer for much longer.
Would love to hear your thoughts on the Barstool drama. I think you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But that whole situation where they tried to, I don't know, give them a $20 T-shirt to cover it up. But what are your thoughts on that story, those that know of it, and kind of how you saw them approach that bad PR?
Yeah, so Barstool, I think, does social media better than almost anybody, actually, because of how they're able to identify their audience and super serve them in the voice, right? But and I think this probably just goes down to maybe some young folks that worked at the company that just don't understand copyright, right?
Yep.
And they just like, hey, this is on the internet, I can grab this and put it up, and I'm promoting this person. And it doesn't really, like I said, it doesn't work that way and get you in trouble. Mm-hmm. So that's what they saw. Obviously, I think the response was not the best response in terms of like, how do you deal with something like that?
I'd say so, to say the least.
Yeah. So I think it's really, you got to be buttoned up, and you can't take other people's stuff. It's just not okay, right? You wouldn't, if Barstool creates original content or any of the guys that creates, we wouldn't think about taking that. So you gotta get the permissions, but you got to do the right thing.
How do you feel? Because I think, I'm a huge fan of the NBA and what they've done globally, and Adam Silver, because they pretty much said, hey, if you're a fan of our content and you want to rip and make a Russell Westbrook highlight and put it up on your channel, the more the merrier. Like, push our brand. Like, and I think, as a combat sports guy as well, I've seen so many old fights of different guys that I never had the opportunity to see, and became a UFC fan just by watching those old fights that were either the official UFC channel or not. So how do you balance that? Because I know the NBA says, hey, if you want to talk about our game all day long, feel free. But at the same time, you got to kind of be careful.
Yeah, there's two ends of the spectrum that you just talked about, really. And the NBA, who is the most liberal of it, and it has served them really well, just from a marketing standpoint. And I think it's great. If you look at Instagram followers, I think they're at 38 million, something like that, right? They're the highest of the leagues. And then you look at the UFC, which is on the other end of the spectrum, who is shutting everybody down for using the content, including their athletes and their coaches. And so I think I would love to see UFC come closer to where the NBA is at, right? To make the sport bigger. I think that'll help them a great deal. But yeah, there is a balance there, and I think you have to know the league and you have to know what their goals are, and you have to think through that. And I think, House of Highlights is the best example of that, right? The guy Omar had one opportunity to get out, right? Yep. He was taking highlights that belonged to somebody else. He partnered with a brand that had the highlight rights, and look what happened.
But he also was pretty darn successful before he had the rights. He was just kind of going rogue, right? Yeah. And then Turner saw the opportunity and said, hey, listen, let me buy this puppy from you, which is one of the smartest things I think they did for culture. Because I think just by acquiring, I've talked about before, by acquiring Bleacher and also acquiring House of Highlights, they've almost got at least hoop fandom and culture in the palm of their hand by those two acquired.
For sure. It feels like House of Highlights is probably the most important digital sports property right now, and I think that's a really great base for them.
I mean, is it the most important highlight property out right now? I think, I mean, you can you make, I think I make the argument that they're single-handedly ruined Sports Center as a model. That can, they invested in a $150 million studio, I think, and that the ratings continue to go down on that because I can see every major highlight that I care about in the palm of my hand rather than having to tune in on TV, which used to be, I know you're a huge sports guy, ESPN News used to be on repeat on my TV all the time.
Yeah, we used to wait for it to come on. You don't have to, right? You have to wait, especially back in the day, like when you had fantasy baseball, before fantasy football became big, right? You were waiting for all the highlights for your guys every single night. But now you're right, with House of Highlights and some of the other accounts that are available, I think it's harder for SportsCenter. I know I don't watch SportsCenter.
Yeah, I know.
So House of Highlights does it, and some of the other guys are doing it really well. But I think it may be the most important, actually.
There's a lot of brands, a lot of television shows, a lot of sports teams that listen to this podcast. How would you recommend they tap into UGC? Because you talk about community, right? If you like food, if you like travel, if you like running, there's UGC content out there that speaks to that audience that people will enjoy. I love basketball, so I love to see people dunk from the free throw line or dunk on three people in a high school game that I have no idea who the players are. That's interesting for me to see. There seems like, right, there's an opportunity here. There's an opening for almost every brand to tap into UGC because it is so successful online.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the idea is understanding what like I said before, the passion points of your consumer and thinking about how do you just scale up your content acquisition of really great user-generated content and not be so fearful that it doesn't have the exact brand message in it the way you want it to. Don't feel like you have to craft everything. Don't feel like it has to be so glossy. Mm-hmm. Just go get the really great stuff. And there's a huge opportunity. Like for sports, I think when you look at sort of what One Championship is doing, I don't know if you're familiar with one, they tap it into their athletes, right, and all the content they're creating. If you look at some of these other properties where you've got fans all over the world that are music fans, dive into that. Yeah. Deep dive into that content that you think your audience loves and, figure out a way to acquire it because I think it goes a long way.
What do you think, have you followed them, of what Wave.tv is doing?
Yeah, sure.
Because they're essentially just aggregating all sports content and they're putting it in a meme template. It's not that sexy and not that highly produced, but I think they're the fastest growing sports aggregator on social right now. I'd love to get your thoughts on what they're doing.
Yeah, I follow them closely, and we talk with them frequently, and I think they're doing a really great job. Like, I love seeing this. They focus on a lot of like the sports that you don't see, the sports that don't get television coverage, and the wild and outrageous stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think they're doing a great job. And I think they're building out their network of sort of in that Barstool model of individuals that feed into the main account. And I think that's a really great way to, you almost have scouts that exist all over the world to help feed your network. Yep. They're doing a really good job. I like it a lot.
Where do you think this is headed? Because I know from a social standpoint, we talked about UGC in particular is doing so well on Instagram and pretty much every platform. As we fast forward 3-5 years from now, I think there's a lot more opportunity for people to spin new shows that factor on UGC online, on digital, package these up for more monetizable opportunities. But what are your thoughts and what do you kind of envision happening here in the next few years?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think there's a couple of things that we think about. One is the number of different opportunities that you can create from user-generated content. And it doesn't have to be just the actual individual piece, right? There's more stories to be told. There's a lot of people and a lot of stories to discover within them, taking that talent and shooting, maybe it's a more premium show around it. And then how do you sort of then scale that up in terms of how do you identify talent? I think I look at this idea of content to commerce, right? And if you find really passionate niche audiences that are developing really great content and you're able to then develop brands out of that maybe it's events or it's product and that you can bear out of those sort of niche groups, I think that'll continue to be a big thing. I think we'll see more and more of that.
I agree. Do you know off the top of your head what the most requested or most engaging or most viewed piece of UGC content that you guys have in the library or most requested?
Yeah, I think it's Chewbacca Mom. Do you remember that video?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have that video. That video, in terms of views,
Oh
like
my God.
I think that's the biggest one. Yeah. We have a couple other famous ones like Pizza Rat, and we had that seal video maybe about a year ago where the little girl got pulled into the.
Oh yeah, that was scary stuff.
Yeah, that was ours too. So there's a bunch of them.
So people are asking to license that all the time, I bet. How have you, I always talk about, influencers as well and their ability to push the brand messaging. What are your thoughts on that space right now? And again, that's almost a user-generated content, right? Like, hey, here's my brand. Can you find a way to genuinely talk to your audience about my brand or weave in our brand's message into your everyday type of content? What are some best practices or some things you've seen in space that work well?
It's interesting because we don't do a ton with influencers. Mm-hmm. So we consider, when I talk about UGC, it is one of the pillars, and it seems to be the one that everybody has is at the top of mind for everybody all the time. Yep. So it's sometimes when we talk about it, it's not either or, it's not influencer or UGC, it's both. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that it really comes down to the expertise that person has in whatever category that you're promoting, right? And I think, I don't know, I think when you look at who do you want your influencers to be, it doesn't necessarily work to have the broadest, biggest audience. It's really that person that speaks to their audience in the most authoritative and expert way, and they engage. And so it's going to be interesting to see like how that landscape plays out with the smaller influencer and really using more smaller influencers, and then just use the big ones maybe for that broad sort of communication. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out there.
Have you guys seen an uptick in just people coming to you in terms of Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime? There's a lot more documentaries. There's a lot more content overall being created. I think Netflix put a solid $7.5 billion in original content. I know some of that content is, putting that user-generated stuff in there or kind of speaking to the internet as a whole. Do you see that as a big part of your guys' business going forward as well?
Yeah, so we have an original content business, actually. So we have a guy and his team is responsible for coming up and creating those original concepts and going to the Hulus and the Netflix.
That's awesome.
Of the world. Yeah, to think through what can you do. Like I said, there's a lot you can do with one piece of user-generated content. And we sold a series to Verizon. It was really covering events like the Cubs winning the World Series and the Women's March and the eclipse, and using user-generated content to tell those stories. So if you think about it, it's being able to cover an event from multiple perspectives without actually having to send cameras, right? And so we think that's a possibility. So yeah, it's a big part of what we do every day, and think about how we can continually use this content to tell really great stories. And those guys are in the loop.
It seems like you guys have done a really good job of, killing two birds with one stone, because again, if a Tosh.0 type of program comes to you and asks for licensed product, it sounds like the CEO and you guys internally are like, why don't we just make our own Tosh.0?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we do. And that conversation takes place all the time. Like, what are the ways in which we can develop new shows and programming? So obviously there's relationships and best practices and all those things that get involved in terms of the actual deal coming to fruition and the talent that you attach to it. But we can play both sides in the sense that we can help a show that has a really great idea continue to build their show with the content that we acquire, because we have this engine essentially that is able to do it. And then we have the creatives in-house to be thinking of those ideas as well. So whether we produce it or we co-produce it is a thing that we go through all the time.
We work with the Phillies, and Bryce Harper had a walk-off home run this season, and they cut together a montage of like 11. Yeah, you saw it. Yeah. It's incredible. I mean, that ability it makes you feel like you're in the seat. It makes you feel like you're in the arena. You hear the audible of the crowd in a different way than you do on TV. That type of content. I remember we actually going to have the head of sports at Snapchat on the podcast as well, but this is probably going to hurt your feelings. The Michigan State moment when Michigan State, but when Michigan State blocked the punt and ran it to the house in the big house, Snapchat did a story, and again, it showed all the different, from Michigan to Michigan State to a Michigan State bar to a Michigan bar. And telling a story that way is really powerful. So in sports particularly, I just think there's so many opportunities to tap into that as we march forward in social.
I think it's so big. And we tell a lot of, athlete stories, and we do the big sort of beautiful pieces. And I think we love those. Like, I love those documentaries. I love those think pieces and even the fluff pieces that we see on SportsCenter. But like the raw emotion that comes from those clips, obviously I'm going to bring up a good Michigan moment when Jordan Poole hit the buzzer beater 2 years ago in the tourney. Michigan cut together like 30 shots of all the Michigan fans reacting. And my friends and I were sharing it like crazy because you felt like you were there with them. And I think that is something that will be a big deal going forward in sports, is really capturing that fan passion and telling fan stories. And I think that'll get us all to, really come together in terms of like our fandom. And I think it's a great way to tell a story.
Yeah, I don't know if this is public or not, so I won't share it just yet, but there is some cool technology coming out with the different social platforms to be able to source these user-generated content opportunities in geolocation type thing. So it's amazing, right? If you can do that, anybody at Staples Center that sees a buzzer beater from LeBron James, you can actually see a full library of that immediately. That's going to be an awesome opportunity too.
Yeah, I think when we apply AI to the discovery process, it's going to be a game changer. It's something that we think about and talk about a lot, but once it's truly dialed in, it'll be incredible because you'll be able to spin out those stories immediately.
Yeah, I mean, almost a house of highlights. If there's some type of AI behind it, rather than refreshing and hoping someone posts it, you can almost have any user-generated content that was uploaded in this area, geo-fenced. We want to be able to push and approve and disapprove immediately.
Right. Yeah. So if you think about, you said geolocation, logo recognition, and that, you're talking stuff that can happen in real time. It'll be a lot of fun.
And as a sports fan, I mean, especially when it's your favorite sports team, you're just looking for, if the Lakers hit a buzzer beater in the NBA championship, I want every angle. I want all the different pundits talking about it. I want to hear more about this amazing opportunity. So I can see fans just salivating over those moments, which I think will make your guys' job a lot easier too.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Well, cool. Any last words? I think what we learned as marketers is, for goodness sake, at least DM the folks and ask them if you could use it on your platform, just to keep yourself out of the lawyer's office. But any lasting words for marketers and UGC as a topic of going forward that they can keep in mind?
Yeah, there's just a tremendous amount of great content that's created every single day, and don't feel like you have to be beholden always to that very particular brand guideline that maybe you have been taught historically. Speak to those passion points, get out there and find that really great content that engages your audience. And let's tell really great stories using the content that your consumers are creating.
All right, Brendon. It seems we only hang out when in New York and you're in LA. So let's make it happen. All right, brother. We're too close to not make it happen. Thanks so much for your time, man. I appreciate it.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Adios. Later.
Thanks, man.
There he was, Brendon Mulvihill. Thanks so much for joining us on the Business of Social podcast. Really interesting. UGC, I mean, we talked about it on the show, that whole Instagram thing that went down where they took down a bunch of meme accounts and the internet went crazy, and they even hired somebody to now be the partnership manager of these said meme creators. So listen, UGC is such an important part of it. I think Brendon even mentioned it. It somewhat runs the internet. But from a business owner perspective, what really got me going was just their ability to like triple down on their content. I mean, not only are they licensing this stuff out to networks and partners, they're also, serving this content on their own platforms like Fail Army, like the Pet Collective. They're also pitching the Tosh.0s of the world to a Netflix, to a Hulu. So they are finding a way to get this content inside their building and just monetize on it a bunch of different ways, which is such a cool thing to see. I really like what he said too, and I think all of us marketers can take it away, with a piece of UGC and really a piece of a lot of content. You can reskin it 9 different ways and put it in a bunch of different formats on a bunch of different platforms, and again, be able to double down and capitalize on that content. The same way that this podcast can also be a blog. It can also be short highlights or snippets on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. So there's a lot of cool ways, and I think I think a lot of partners that I work with and a lot of people in social don't think about that enough. Yes, you invested a ton of time and effort and money on this one piece of macro content. How do you then make a ton of micro content from that? And I think Brendon and his team get that more than anybody. And, Will and I were just talking about it as well. You got to make sure the voice is right, especially with UGC. I'll use a really old school, piece of content, but it's like, Friday be like, or walk into the office like, those type of, text tweets per se that can go with a piece and marry that with a piece of really poignant UGC content. We see that almost every day in our Slack channel here at STN. So we all know what we're talking about. So once again, head of licensing at Jukin Media. Thank you so much, Brendon, for being a part of the program. We would really appreciate you if you rate 5 stars and subscribe on iTunes. That's big for us, and we're always looking at those numbers and make sure we're tracking really well on that. If you're more of a video galler guy, you can check us out on YouTube. We're on Spotify. We're on all the different platforms. So make sure to subscribe and check us out on a weekly basis on all of that. Thank you so much to Dylan. Thank you so much to Will for all their help on today's show. This has been another edition of the Business of Social Podcast, episode 44, powered by STN Digital.